Welcome everyone to New York Buddha Dharma. We are working our way through Punlap Rinpoche's text, Mind Beyond Death. And we have arrived, we're going through the Bardos, and we've arrived tonight at the Bardo of Dharmata. So in Tibetan it's called the Chöni Bardo. And it means the Bardo of reality, is one way to translate it. Dharmata means the Dharma is sort of what is, what there actually is in this cosmos. Dharmata, Dharmaness. Chöni, this means the same thing. And the idea is that in fact, I'm going to start looking at my notes. Oops. Could you hand me my glasses? They're in there, I'm sorry. That one you have a left hand on. Down inside there's a note in there. No, you don't have to unzip it there. Glass case. Thank you. So the process of dying begins when we contract the condition that's going to kill us. This can be slow and gradual, take years, as in the case of a relative of mine who's been working with breast cancer for 24 years, stage 4 for 7, and it just gets slowly more intense. Or, the other extreme is immediately sudden death. An automobile accident. 6 weeks ago, I think it was, a friend of mine died in his sleep in a fire. His house caught fire and burned down around him. And he died in that fire, probably of asphyxiation. Nobody really knows how it happened. He was perfectly healthy, and everything in between. And at some point, this is the beginning when you contract this condition that is going to end your life. You go through the Bardo. Bardo means interval, right? From to, and this interval is the interval of dying. And during this interval, you shut down. First, the coarse body shuts down, and this is described in terms of the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, space, and wind. Earth, water, fire, wind, and space, in that order. One dissolving into the next. And the coarse body shuts down, at which point medical science usually would pronounce you dead. Your heart is stopped, your breathing is stopped, you're flatlining. But the Buddhist description says not quite. The mind has not completely died. And what happens is that the mind is described having 2 aspects. One is the fundamental, ongoing reality, which is not personal, of which we are all a part. This space, which is lit with knowingness. And you might call it now. It's always now. Never dies. The word Tantra means continuity. And the continuity that it refers to is the continuity of this now, this knowingness in the now. But then that is punctuated like an ocean by waves with thoughts. These thoughts are all about I and other, past and future. And they're anxious, lit by concern for I, which doesn't actually exist. It's just like a wave that is going to dissolve in the next instant. But we think we exist, the I does, and struggles to maintain itself repeatedly over and over and over again. And what dies at the end of the death process is the I and all that is attendant to it. And what is attendant to it is divided into the three types of mental events having to do with the three poisons. There are mental events having to do with aggression, passion or desire, and indifference or ignorance. And the idea is simply that as long as you believe in I and other, those are the three possible relationships that can inhere between I and other. If the I regards the other as inimical, as threatening, you want to kill it, push it away. Put it in Lane's pouch and get rid of it. If the I looks like it's going to do you some good and bolster your existence, then you want to pull it to you. That's desire, hatred. Desire and passion. And if it's indifferent, you stay the same distance. So all the mental events are divided into these three categories. And basically what happens is at the last moment of death, there's a description of how they dissolve. They dissolve by moving through the subtle body and dissolving in the heart. And at the moment that they all finally dissolve, there is a moment of complete cessation of ego mind, of confused mind. And all that is left is this fundamental awareness. Now, if we have trained in this lifetime, if we have received one way or another pointing out instruction so that we have recognized this fundamental awareness beyond neurotic thought, and if we have trained in it, then at that moment it is possible for us to achieve awakening. Let me see how he puts it. If we don't, this is called the ground luminosity in this text, that fundamental awareness. It's luminous because it's lit by knowledge. It's the ground because it's the very ground of our being. The term in Sanskrit is alaya. The term in Tibetan is kunji. And this is the true ground of our being. And if we've recognized it, then we can dissolve into it. It says, but if we don't recognize the ground luminosity, then, as he puts it, the TV flashes off. There's a moment of sort of blackout. And when it flashes on once more, we are in an entirely different state, a different world. See, when we experience the ground luminosity, this is what's called, remember last week, this is the Dharmakaya. It's the fundamental ground of all being. There's nothing that exists in it, and yet it's cognizant of nothing in particular, but has the potential for being cognizant of anything. And it's the ground of all being. They call it Kadak, alpha pure. And if we miss that, it's possible to recognize it, and they actually call that recognition, I'll just remind you, the mother-child experience. The child is the practice that you've done in your lifetime. It's imperfect, it's not fully developed, But when it sees the mother, which is the real thing, this ground luminosity, it leaps into the mother's lap, like a child leaping into, recognizing its mother and leaping into its lap. But if that doesn't take place, if we don't recognize it, then, as Dzogchen Pomla puts it, there's a moment of blackout. The TV flashes off and on, and we are in an entirely different state, which is the Sambhogakaya realm. Now, the Sambhogakaya realm has the same quality as the Dharmakaya, in that nothing has any true existence. In fact, the idea of true existence is a myth. It doesn't happen. Everything, there is nothing that endures through time. There is nothing that is independent of everything else. And there is nothing that is unitary. And this is the fundamental definition of existence that we look for. And we never find it. So that also is there in the Sambhogakaya realm. But now, in the Sambhogakaya realm, phenomena are arising. Sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touch, and mental events. They're arising and passing away. They have no inherent existence. They don't truly exist. They're like images in a mirror, like reflections on water. And this is the Sambhogakaya realm. Now, in this realm, if we see it, everything is extraordinarily vivid. The arising of these phenomena. Let me just see what he says here. He talks about this, the clarity aspect of the Dharmakaya luminosity begins to become more vivid. The luminosity that arises now from the ground nature is the luminosity of appearance. Appearance are these different phenomena. It's also called the spontaneously arising luminosity, or the luminosity of spontaneous presence. The term in Tibetan is for spontaneity is hlundrup. This is very important when we talk about the Sambhogakaya realm, because what it refers to is the fact that everything, this gesture, these words, the feeling of my bottom on the cushion, arises and passes away at the same time. You can't even find the moment when it stops arising and turns to passing away. It's a continuity. So much so that you can never even point to what it was that passed. He calls it the union of appearance and emptiness. The emptiness, you see, comes from the Dharmakaya. Nothing exists. And yet, things appear, like images in a mirror, like reflections on water. They just appear, and yet they don't exist. This is the mantra. Things arise, and yet they do not exist. They do not exist, and yet they arise. So, there is a description of this, but one of the key to understanding this description of how phenomena arise and pass away is that they arise in the form of a mandala. Now, a mandala is an organization of the cosmos, and each one of us has our own mandala. We are at the center of a mandala, and we're looking out. We're always looking east. East is where the sun rises. East is where the things are setting, are initiating. So everything is always initiating, right? And so we're always looking east. Also, there is the mandala mandalas, many of them, that we are part of. So we're part of the mandala of this little class. We're part of the mandala of New York City. We're part of the mandala of the United States. Everything organizes into mandalas. And the basic structure of the mandala is that of the compass. That's why that picture there. It's organized into 5 parts. These are called the 5 Buddhas, or the 5 Buddha families. And all phenomena falls into one or more of these families, and it can be more. And there's the center, there is the north, and let me just take a look at the drawing that I've given you. Oops. Could somebody give me a copy of the drawing? No, the drawing. Thank you. Okay. When you look at this drawing, the north is to the right. It's that green Buddha. The east is at the bottom. That's the blue one. South is to the left. West is to the north, is to the top. Okay? So to the right is north, bottom is east, left is south, top is, that's the red Buddha, and that's the west. And then the center is the center Buddha. And all phenomena can be classed into one or more of these families. The most important classifications have to do with wisdom, sanity, enlightened mind on the one hand, and neurosis, defilement, klesha in Sanskrit on the other. And these two are completely related. When klesha is seen truly to be as it is in the light of reality, it becomes wisdom. So each one of these Buddha families represents a wisdom and a klesha. The Buddha family in the center, that Buddha is Vairochana. Can I have the other sheet too? Sorry. Mandala, the arrangement of these Buddha families varies slightly from one sect and one school within a sect to the other. But on the whole, usually in the center we have Vairochana, and he is white in color, and he represents his wisdom as the wisdom of Dharma Dhatu, which means Dharma Dhatu is the space in which all phenomena arise. So he is this very spacious quality that allows for the arising and passing away of all phenomena. It's sort of the charnel ground. It's both the birth, the womb, and the graveyard for phenomena, the idea of the Dharma Dhatu. And that's the wisdom that he represents. The klesha that he represents is stupidity or sloth. And I've always liked the Buddha family. The symbol is an 8-spoked wheel. That's not shown here. The symbols aren't shown. And it's delusion or ignorance is his klesha. And it gives you the skanda, which we won't go into. And there's a feminine Buddha associated with him, Tattvishvari. And his element is space. And people who have a lot of Buddha in them tend to be very spacious people. There's a kind of generosity in it, in that they allow everything to arise and pass away without tampering. Not everything, but more than other people might. And it's a kind of generosity. They tolerate neurosis around them, and maybe only step in when it's extreme, where I might be irritated and act much more quickly because of my particular families. On the other hand, it involves an extraordinary kind of sloth. And I think I told you, did I? About my roommate? It was very Buddha. I told Joe. And you? Okay. Trying to reach him, actually. And typically, he's utterly unreachable. He just doesn't respond to emails, phone calls. I've called some friends, and they say, oh yeah, really hard to reach him. He's reclusive that way. So it sounds like basically everybody here is very familiar with this. Is that true? Say no. Huh? I think the key point, maybe, from the point of view of all this, is the wisdom and the klesha. To the right, the green Buddha, that represents akshobhya. And the karma. There are karmas. There are only 4 karmas. See, the Vairochana has no karma, no action. Karma literally means action, and in this case, enlightened action and neurotic action. And Vairochana has none. He's just space. But to the right, akshobhya, his wisdom is the wisdom of all accomplishment. It gets everything done. And his karma is activity, and especially destruction, when things need to be destroyed. At the bottom, we have, I'm trying to remember, there's different versions of who that is, but let's say it's Vajrasattva. And he represents the mirror-like wisdom. This is wisdom which sees everything very clearly. It's sort of super intellectual. And it's, when it gets very neurotic, it gets stupid. You know, you've met people who are sort of hyper-intellectual. It gets kind of silly. But in the klesha associated with this is anger. It's like a sword that dissects everything very fast. To the left is Ratnasambhava, the Buddha. And Ratna means jewel. Oh, I forgot, the symbol for Akshobhya on the right is the sword. The symbol for Vajrasattva, there's another Buddha that represents, is the Vajra, the Dorje. Yeah? Amoga Siddhi is to the right. Is that right? He's the Karma family. And Akshobhya, who's down here, or sometimes Vajrasattva, is blue. I'm sorry, I got it mixed up. Thank you, Ben. Amoga Siddhi. And Amoga Siddhi, but the green represents action, activity, accomplishment. The season, for instance, is the summer, when if you were to pry up a clod of earth, you'd find lots of worms and bugs and everything. It's totally alive. The blue Buddha at the bottom is Akshobhya, and that he represents extreme intellect, and his season is the winter, when everything is frozen, crystalline, sharp, outlined. Cold intellect. His wisdom is the wisdom that sees how things are put together, very clear, crystalline. To the left is Ratnasambhava, and his symbol is the jewel. He represents wealth. His season is autumn, the harvest. Everything is fecund, and fruit falling off the tree. It's so ripe. And his wisdom is the wisdom of fulfillment, also called the wisdom of equanimity. But it's the wisdom that is very generous. That's his virtue, his generosity. And the way his action, his karma, is to be generous, to give. And at the top we have Amitabha, the Bodhisattva, the Buddha of compassion in this case. And he's red in color. His symbol is the lotus. And his season is the springtime, sort of mountain meadows full of wildflowers and wild sheep gambling. And his wisdom is discriminating awareness wisdom. It sees the way things present, sort of the surface presentation of things. And his action is magnetizing, seducing. So the idea, you see, is that a Buddha, when they are pacifying a situation or trying to enlighten somebody, or bring sanity, peace, wisdom, the first thing they might try is understanding. That's the Akshobhya in the east here, at the bottom, blue. If that doesn't work, then they might try generosity, giving to the situation, Ratnasambhava in the west, and the south, And then if that doesn't work, then they might try seduction. That's Amitabha in the west. And then if that doesn't work, then it comes down to destruction, which is Amoga Siddhi in the north. Now, when a person is on the path to enlightenment, this is the order in which, well, it isn't the order. They develop the first three karmas first. That is, pacifying, enriching, and magnetizing. A person only develops the fourth, the karma of destruction activity, with enlightenment itself. I guess because it's so dangerous and also because it requires a complete letting go of any notion of ego, self-protection, and a complete merging with what is real and appropriate. To be able to do that kind of fearless, extreme action. This is the organization, you might say, of this world, the real world. Now, we don't see this world. We see a world of things because we believe in our own personal existence and in the existence of others. And that completely robs us of the ability to see the world of the Buddha families and of these magical, almost very meaningful and communicative presentations that are going on around us all the time. So it's as though we're sort of walking through this world and seeing it through a glass darkly. We can't see the real thing. But at the moment of death, when everything is stripped from us, we have an opportunity to actually see it. Now, if we miss the first opportunity to see the Bardo, see the Dharmata, the Dharmakaya experience, then we move into the second phase of the Bardo of reality, which is to see this world, the Sambhogakaya experience. And I think I'm going to read a section, because I like this actually better than what I found in Mind Beyond Death. This is from Sogyo Rinpoche's book, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And this is in his section on the Bardo of Dharmata. So I'm going to read this, stop, and put up a hand at any point. The Bardo of Dharmata has 4 phases, each one of which presents another opportunity for liberation. If the opportunity is not taken, then the next phase will unfold. The explanation I am giving here of this Bardo originates in the Dzogchen Tantras, that's the Great Perfection Tantras, where it is taught that only through the special advanced practice of luminosity, trekchod, can the true significance of the Bardo of Dharmata be in any real sense understood. Now, I'm going to back up a little bit, and this is very advanced teaching. The two main practices of Dzogchen. One is called trekchod, which means cutting through. The other is called trekchod, which is usually translated, it's very hard to translate, but it's often translated as crossing over. Doesn't really mean too much. Cutting through is the practice of coming into reality, of just waking up to this open, spacious dimension of the Dharmakaya. Now, the best practice for this, when we do our practice together here, when you are resting in space, that is the practice of resting in the Dharmakaya, depending on how much realization you've had. If you've had a lot, you might actually be seeing the Dharmakaya. Without that, if you haven't had the experience of recognizing that, then you're probably resting in the alaya, the ground awareness, the alaya vijnana, which is still confused, but it's close. It's close. And the reason this is important is that when you enter into the Bardo of reality, and especially the second phase, where you're seeing the Sambhogakaya world, you can stay there depending on how much you've trained to remain in awareness in this life. And they talk about the amount of time you will spend seeing the Bardo of Sambhogakaya is measured in what are called meditation days. A meditation day is the amount of time that you can stay present. If you can stay present for 1 minute, you will stay in the Bardo, in the Sambhogakaya realm, for 12 minutes. 12 meditation days. If you can stay present for an hour without lapsing into dream, you will stay in the Bardo of Sambhogakaya Bardo for 12 hours. And if you are fully committed to be able to rest in awareness, then you'll probably just awake and never go on to the next Bardo at all, but live in the realm of reality altogether. I'm going to stop here for a question because this is pretty heavy stuff. Anybody want to say anything? I'm suspecting that Ben and Carmen may have heard some of this before, studying with Riggs and Chikpo. Well, then the next practice, you see, trekchod is just the ability to rest in space. The second practice, tugel, is a practice that is very different than anything that we are doing here. In this practice, you work with light and the eyes, and you train yourself to be able to see what amounts to the Sambhogakaya realm. Different people have different facility to do this, and I'm not going to go into it very much because these teachings are secret. Anything I can do to help you here? No? But suffice it to say that if you are an excellent tugel practitioner, you are seeing everything that is going to be described in this next description of the Sambhogakaya realm that a person can see in the Bardo of Dharmata. The preparation for doing that is to practice tugel in this lifetime. Both trekchod and tugel, they go together. One can actually just practice trekchod. There's been a lot of argument about this over the centuries. The current line in the Nyingma sect is you absolutely must practice trekchod, cutting through, resting in space, spacious, open awareness. If you want to really amp it up, then you practice tugel as well, but you don't need it. If you're a good trekchod practitioner, that's enough to get enlightened with. But if you practice tugel, all the better. Any questions, comments? And the reason that I feel it's okay for me to say these things, because I've been sworn to secrecy about this from a teacher that I'm studying with, is that it's right here in Sogyal Rinpoche's book, and more. So I feel if it's in the public domain, it's okay. I'm not breaking Samaya. What do you think? Agree with me, Carmen?
Well, it's kind of self-secret, isn't it?
It's self-secret. Very good. Until one actually experiences these things, they remain self-secret. Trungpa Rinpoche used to say that all the time. I'll bet you heard that from Riggs and Chikpo, and I'll bet he got it from Trungpa Rinpoche. Okay, so I'm going to read a little more from here. So he says, only through the special advanced practice of luminosity, tugel, can the true significance of the Bardo of Dharmata be in any real sense understood, or the second phase of it anyhow. The Bardo of Dharmata then figures with far less prominence in other cycles of teachings on death in the Tibetan tradition, even in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which also belongs to the Dzogchen teachings. The sequence of these four phases is only implicit, as if slightly hidden, and does not appear there in such a clear and ordered structure. I must stress, however, that all words could possibly do is give some conceptual picture of what might happen in the Bardo of Dharmata. The appearances of this Bardo will remain just conceptual images until the practitioner has perfected both trekchod and tugel, when each detail of the description I'm about to give becomes an undeniable personal experience. What I'm trying to give you here is some sense that such a marvelous and amazing dimension could exist, and to complete my description of the whole of the Bardos, I also profoundly hope that this complete description could act perhaps as some kind of reminder when you go through the process of death. They say when you go through the process of death, you get really, really smart. 7 times as smart as you ever were in life. And things that you heard, teachings you heard, become back to you crystal clear. So the first of these 4 stages is luminosity, the landscape of light. In the Bardo of Dharmata, you take on a body of light. The first phase of this bardo is when space dissolves into luminosity. Suddenly, you become aware of a flowing, vibrant world of sound, light, and color. All the ordinary features of our familiar environment have melted into an all-pervasive landscape of light. This is brilliantly clear and radiant, transparent, and multicolored, unlimited by any kind of dimension or direction, shimmering and constantly in motion. The Tibetan Book of the Dead calls it like a mirage on a plain in the heat of summer. Its colors are the natural expression of the intrinsic elemental qualities of the mind. Space is perceived as blue light, water as white, here we go with the Buddha families, earth as yellow, fire as red, and wind as green. How stable these dazzling appearances of light are in the Bardo of Dharmata depends entirely upon what stability you have managed to attain in Tugel practice. Only a great mastery of this practice will enable you to stabilize the experience and so use it to gain liberation. Otherwise, the Bardo of Dharmata will simply flash by like a bolt of lightning. You will not even know that it has occurred. Let me stress again that only a practitioner of Tugel will be able to make the all-important recognition that these radiant manifestations of light have no existence separate from the nature of mind. And for most people, the vast billions on the planet who have never even practiced meditation, trekchod, or much less Tugel, they don't even see it. It just goes by in a finger snap, just like that. But all beings, for all beings, even the lowest microbes, it goes by. It's there. All sentient beings. Number 2, union, the deities. If you are unable to recognize this, what he just described, these flashing lights, this as the spontaneous display of rikpa. Rikpa is that pure awareness that's revealed when you see reality. Then the simple rays and colors begin to integrate and coalesce into points of light, balls of light, of different sizes. They're called tigle. You may have even seen tigle. It's possible. It's not an uncommon phenomenon, especially if you look into a bright light. This is different than seeing, what do you call them? Those worms you see in your eye? Floaters. It's different than floaters. You actually see little circles. Sometimes if you look into a bright light, don't look, this is often done with the sun, but when you do use the sun, you can't look directly at the sun, obviously, because you'll burn your eyes. You look slightly to the side of the sun, but you can look at it in a very high intensity, like a flashlight. And sometimes you'll see the tigles, they're little round circles. That's sort of beginning Tugel practice. Within them, and then within the tigles, this is interesting, the mandalas of the peaceful and wrathful deities appear as enormous spherical concentrations of light seeming to occupy the whole of space. And you'll actually see the mandala within the tigle. Now, when tigles start, when you start seeing them, they're tiny. But even when they're tiny, sometimes you can see that they're colored in 5 colors if you take a good look. But eventually, at some point, you're seeing whole mandalas inside them with figures. This is the second phase, known as luminosity dissolving into union, where the luminosity manifests in the form of Buddhas or deities of various size, color, and form, holding different attributes. The brilliant light they emanate is blinding and dazzling. The sound is tremendous, like the roaring of 1,000 thunderclaps, and the rays and beams of light are like lasers, piercing everything. These are the 42 peaceful and 58 wrathful deities, the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities that arise, depicted in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. They unfold over a certain period of days, taking on their own characteristic mandala of 5-fold clusters of all these deities, peaceful and wrathful. 100. Now, there's a teacher, Kenshin Namdrol Rinpoche, who used to be head of Nyingma Shedra. He retired. He lives in Parping. He built a mandala of the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities. It's about a square block, and it is 4 stories high of poured concrete. And in it are statues of every one of these deities, painted. Now, I saw and walked through the structure when it was just finished construction, and saw some of the statues that had been cast, and a few of which had been painted. But I haven't seen the complete thing. That was in 2011. It's now finished. So I would really like to go to Parping and see this as preparation. I mean, it would help you when you get to this, if you take this seriously, when you get to this stage, if you had gone through and remember what you've seen, the mandala of the peaceful and wrathful deities, isn't that something?
Where is it?
Parping, Nepal, about an hour and a quarter, hour and a half outside of Kathmandu, into the boonies. And he has a little Gampa there, Kenshin Namdrol. And he has a number of people that are in a 3-year retreat. And there's some visitors who come and do retreats. And he has this structure there. He lives there most of the time. He comes and teaches in various places, France and in Alameda, California, too. If you're interested, we could talk more about his teachings. So, these are the 42 peaceful and 58 wrathful deities, taken from 5-fold clusters. This is a vision that fills the whole of your perception with such intensity that if you are unable to recognize it for what it is, it appears terrifying and threatening. Sheer fear and blind panic can consume you and you faint. From yourself and from the deities, very fine shafts of light stream out, joining your heart and theirs. Countless luminous spheres appear in their rays, which increase and then roll up as the deities all dissolve into you. Now, here's the thing. What you're constantly enjoined, it's not in here, but this is the case, that all of this, everything you see, is a projection coming out of your own mind. It's not even your mind, out of mind. It's coming, and there's a description of how it rises up through the channels and comes out. There's a particular set of channels that comes out the eyes, and it projects these things out there. And you are told this over and over again, because if you take these things to be real, as external to a you, to an I, then this can be an absolutely horrible, terrifying experience. And this absolutely, and here's the thing, nobody says this, but the implication is that everything we're seeing now, Lane, Ben, Marie, same thing. That we are projecting it out, from our own minds. Yes, Carmen?
Francesca Fremantle says that is an aspect of the heat, or the heat aspect of one of the Buddhas. And the way we experience that heat is not so much as warm, but as light. The light that both allows us to see the light and the qualities that the objects have, which are like shape and color. And at the same time, what allows us to put those things together is the
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, heat in this case means the vividness, the extraordinary vividness of phenomena. Not just vision, but sound, taste, touch, smell, and mind too, yeah. Yeah, it's very, I find it very difficult to comprehend, but the picture is so vivid and compelling, and the practices are there. And if you make an effort to get in front of the right teacher, you can practice these things. Trekchod is really the extension. It's just the deepest version of what we're doing here when we practice our Vipassana meditation. Vipassana is trekchod. Just trekchod is Vipassana perfected. Tugal is altogether different. That's a different fish. Let's read the third and fourth and then we'll end. Wisdom is the third. If again you fail to recognize and gain stability, the next phase unfolds called union dissolving into wisdom. Another fine shaft of light springs from out of your heart, and an enormous vision unfolds from it. However, every detail remains distinct and precise. This is the display of the various aspects of wisdom which appear together in a show of unfurled carpets of light and resplendent spherical luminous fields. Tiglays. First, on a carpet of deep blue light appears shimmering tiglays of sapphire blue in patterns of 5. Above that, on a carpet of white light, you're seeing all this, you see in space. On a carpet of white light appear radiant tiglays white like crystal. Above, on a carpet of yellow light, appear golden tiglays, and upon that a carpet of red light supports ruby red tiglays. They are crowned by a radiant sphere, like an outspread canopy made of peacock feathers. This isn't made of peacock feathers, it's like a canopy made of peacock feathers. This brilliant display of light is the manifestation of the 5 wisdoms. Wisdoms of all-encompassing space, mirror-like wisdom, equalizing wisdom, the wisdom of equanimity, wisdom of discernment, that's what I call discriminating awareness wisdom, that's in the West, that's Padma, and all-accomplishing wisdom in the North. But since the all-accomplishing wisdom is only perfected at the time of enlightenment, it does not appear yet. Therefore, there is no green carpet of light and tiglays. Yet it is inherent within all the other colors. What is being manifested here is our potential of enlightenment, and the all-accomplishing wisdom will only appear when we become a Buddha. If you do not attain liberation here, through resting undistracted in the nature of mind, the carpets of light and their tiglays, along with your rikpa, that's your fundamental intelligence, all dissolve into the radiant sphere of light, which is like a canopy of peacock feathers. And then finally there's the fourth. This heralds the final phase of the Bardo of Dharmata, wisdom dissolving into spontaneous presence. Spontaneous presence is the spontaneous arising of phenomena. Now the whole of reality presents itself in one tremendous display. First, the state of primordial purity dawns like an open, cloudless sky. This is the Dharmakaya. It's like an open, cloudless sky. Then the peaceful and wrathful deities appear, followed by the pure realms of the Buddhas. These are like the heavens, so-called, the Akanishta heaven, Tushita heaven, and all the others. And below them, the 6 realms of samsaric existence. The limitlessness of this vision is utterly beyond our ordinary imagination. Every possibility is presented, from wisdom and liberation to confusion and rebirth. At this point, you will find yourself endowed with powers of clairvoyant perception and recollection. For example, with total clairvoyance and your senses unobstructed, you will know your past and future lives, see into others' minds, and have knowledge of all the 6 realms of existence. In an instant, You will vividly recall whatever teachings you have heard, and even teachings you have never heard will awaken in your mind. The entire vision then dissolves back into its original essence, like a tent collapsing once its ropes are cut. So, when you see this last one, if you see this last one, you will be drawn either to the bright lights of the Buddhas in their heavens, or to the dimmer lights of the realms beneath. You want to avoid the dimmer lights, even though they're much easier to go to. The brighter lights are so intense that they can be frightening and repellent in their intensity. And the dimmer lights can be very seductive. And if you are attracted to those dimmer lights, you will be attracted to the realms that they represent, and each one of them represents a realm. Blue light is the human realm. A grayish dim light is the hell realm, and so it goes. White light is the God realm, I think. And you don't want to do that. And if you miss this altogether, then you're going to move on into the next Bardo, which is the Bardo of Becoming, in which we are moving towards rebirth. And there still are opportunities for enlightenment, as there always are, just even now, right this very second. They just become more distant. Yes, I'm looking. Everybody looks stunned, stoned. It's really interesting stuff. But I mean, the older you get, at least in my case, the more I want to study it, because I read the Dalai Lama. This was years ago. I read this book, and he said that he contemplated all this every day in preparation. I'm going to stop here, I think. We can have a discussion. If I've been disjointed or incomplete, I apologize, but this is, I find, very profound and difficult material.
So you mentioned that we shouldn't be attracted to these colors of different realms, right? So what do you do instead? How do you...
Well, you train by visualizing the realms, partly, the heavens, and you go in with the resolve to go toward the bright lights. And you practice and you meditate so that you're not going to sort of just slip into what is most comfortable, because then you're heading towards the realms.
And the bright lights are what?
The heavens, the Buddha realms. And these are places where you can achieve enlightenment much more easily than in the samsaric realms. In the samsara, the only realm where you can achieve enlightenment is the human realm. So if you're attracted to the other ones, tough luck for this next lifetime. Gotta wait. And even in the human realm, it's relatively difficult to achieve enlightenment, awakening. Whereas in the heavens, the whole idea of a heaven, you see, is that it's not and you can take it either way, as a place that you're going to go, a nice place to go, like the Riviera, or Aruba. You're going to go to Tushita heaven, and where it'll be really pleasant and nice. That's one description. Another one is that what the heavens represent is sane states of mind, where you are much more able to practice the Dharma and live a life of sanity and appreciation and of being of help to others. That's a heaven. And
before you mentioned to recognize the deities on one of the stages, so what do you exactly mean by recognizing them? if you didn't study like Buddhism, but you practice meditation, do you like, how do you recognize them, or what is it like to recognize?
You have to actually get into tantric practice and begin to work with visualizations of the deities, and tantric. You start with what's called creation and completion practice, working with yidam. Deity is a poor word for it. It's a Western word, right? The actual word is yidam. And a yidam is a symbolic representation of an aspect of your enlightenment, your enlightened mind. And what you do is you visualize the actual physical picture of that. And depending on the practice you're doing, you become the deity, and you're seeing the deity, and the deity may well represent your root teacher, your most important teacher, and you're working with the relationship between them, and you become the deity itself. This is called Vajra Pride you're developing. Vajra Pride is the complete and utter confidence that you are what that figure represents. The more you have Vajra Pride, the closer you are to enlightenment itself. And so that's one practice. Another practice is that you could, if you studied Dzogchen with a qualified teacher, you will practice Tugel. And at some point you'll begin to study the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities in order to be able to recognize them. And there are people I know who see these mandalas in their practice. And again, it's still practice, right? We're still like, we're not fully enlightened by any means. But this magical world of Sambhogakaya is here, right now. We're walking through it. But we just don't have the eyes to see it.
And another thing,
that's what the teachings say. Oops, that's out. There we go.
So you said that if you practice meditation for 1 minute, then it multiplies by 12, or...
Supposedly, you inhabit the Bardo of Dharmata for 12 meditation days. And what a meditation day is the length of time you are able to stay present and awake. So that's why it's 12 minutes. If you're able to stay present and awake for 1 minute without going off into dream. See? And that's why the practice that we're doing, I'm giving you this hybrid of shamatha vipassana, but please work on just resting in awareness too, And then if you find yourself dreaming, lost in a dream, you can either just come back to awareness, or you can come back to working with the breath, going out into the awareness. This is what Trungpa Rinpoche taught us. Because that grounds you, brings you back, the breath, the feeling of it as it exits your nostrils, the imagining of it going out into space, all of that cuts through thought. Anything to cut through the thought. Staying thinking to yourself. But the main thing is, try it, just resting in this spacious awareness in the present moment. That is the best practice. It's also the most difficult. Because our minds, we've got these habits in the alaya, stored in the alaya. And they come up. And they will come up in death too. And they will come up, and all of a sudden you're thinking about that enemy of yours, or that person you love, or whatever, with hatred in the one hand and passion on the other, and you're lost in a dream. And then you realize, whoops, I'm dreaming, and you're back. The instant you realize you're dreaming, you're not. You've come back. So try it. Practice resting in space, as well as working with the breath. That's why we have this toolkit, each one of us.
I find it extremely helpful when I do this a practice of mindfulness when I walk, when I'm walking on the street, and like I tend to get lost in my thoughts, but then I come back and I find it extremely helpful when, you know, I contemplate the life around me, every like my steps, my movements. It's really great.
It is. That is the best practice. It's important to do it on the cushion. There's so many triggers as we walk down the street that trigger us into dream. But it's the hardest practice and it's the best. But it's also really important to do it on the cushion. Riggs Chikpo talks about that, doesn't he?
Yeah, I want to say something about that actually.
Okay.
Because at least to us, part of the fundamental teaching about the mandala of meditation is actually not to place ourselves in the center of the mandala, as because there's this misconception of us, almost like there's an us here resting. There are many misconceptions around the idea of space, because we might think sometimes like it's me right here sitting in the middle of the couch, in the middle of this the mat, and then there's the space out there, you know, and I'm gonna rest in that space if we put ourselves in the center of this mandala meditation. But if instead of us being the center of that mandala, awareness is the sort of like the queen or the king of the mandala, then the perspective, the flavor of the meditation changes dramatically, because it's more like in the breathing out is more like a letting go of that sense of self.
Letting go of sense of self?
Into what it is, because we agreed already that there is no such thing as anything, right? So
that's beautiful.
We cannot be at the center of the meditation at
Absolutely.
all, but the awareness only.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, great. Thank you. That's really helpful. I mean, you know, Trungpa Rinpoche used to tell us, become the breath. Be one with the breath. Now, when we take at the beginning of the practice, you know, when we first starting, I like to say to people, take a deep breath and let it out. And in that moment, I mean, I don't know about you, I'm really sort of dissolving into the space as I breathe out. Especially that first big breath. And that's really what we're doing when we ride the breath out. We're going out, we are the breath. And it's not just the breath that's dissolving, it's me. I'm dissolving into the space. This is what you're talking about, right? And when you dissolve into the space, then there's just this. Lit with knowingness and space and intelligence and color and sensation and all that. It's wonderful.
I wanted to ask you something about this experience of the Sambhogakaya and this particular Bardo. Do you think for some of us who are not practicing trekchod or tog-out, but we are meditating or going to retreats or something, sometimes when we come out of a retreat, we see something in a more vivid, sharp, different way, like fresh. Is this connected at all with this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That happens so much in retreat, you know, that people's sensual perceptions intensify. And they wonder, what's going on? Colors become brighter. Bodily sensations become more acute. All kinds of things happen like that. Tastes. It's because we're beginning to come so much more present, so much more awake. And also, remember, you know, you're sort of putting yourself in some kind of a negative light by saying, you know, I'm not practicing trekchod and tog-out. When you practice vipassana, that is the road to trekchod. You know who talks about this is Tulku Ujin, the father of Tsoknyi Rinpoche and Mingyur Rinpoche. He died, but he has a wonderful book called Rainbow Painting. And he talks about the basic practice of vipassana. and how it's always the same practice. It just changes its name from Vipassana to Shunyata to Mahamudra to Dzogchen to trekchod. As you go deeper into it, as you become more one with it, losing the self-consciousness, and then the world changes. How one understands oneself and the world, the more you do this practice. And that's why the name changes. But the practice is always the same, of coming present, resting in this pure present state of mind. And resting is the key. Motionless, without effort. Because this awareness is already here. We don't have to make it happen. We just have to come back to it. I mean, let's just do it for a second. Everybody just sit here and just come back to this space. Here we are. It doesn't matter what you're aware of. Whatever visual objects appear, sound of this voice, bodily sensations that suddenly arise and make themselves felt. Scratch my head. All of this is happening in this space. Space is such a big term. Dhatu in Sanskrit, ying in Tibetan. We just rest here. Effortless. If you make an effort, it gets in the way. Clouds the awareness. That's why breathing out is so good. It's like you're letting go of all that effort. Okay. Let's not carry it too far. Trungpa Rinpoche said about the out-breath, we're working with the out-breath. And the reason is that when you work with the out-breath, you're letting go of me. When you work with the in-breath, you're focusing on me. It's me in here, Close your eyes and you're watching the breath come in. There's this emphasis on me and my struggle. But when you breathe out, there's this quality of relaxation, of letting go, of coming present. And so that technique is working with the out-breath. For years I thought he must have invented it, because I never heard anyone else talk about this thing of combining Vipassana with working with the out-breath. Until maybe 20 or more than 20 years ago, Kenshin Namdrol came to Shambhala Mountain Center and taught it. And then I realized this is Dzogchen, this technique. Just a skillful means. Ben. Then we'll end. Press the button on the bottom. Yeah.
I kind of had the impression that this way of teaching the formless meditation, focusing on the out-breath, to beginners, that was really unique to Trungpa Rinpoche. I got the impression that may have came from Khenpo Gangshar, and I was wondering if you knew anything about that.
No, that's a wonderful idea, though. If we ever get close again to Channeling Rinpoche, we can ask him. He knows a lot about Khenpo Gangshar.
I heard a story that Khenpo Gangshar got sick, and when he recovered, he was very different and manifested crazy wisdom, and his teaching style changed, and it was around that time that this kind of instruction became very important to him. And so that's what I was wondering about, if you had heard of that or anything about that.
No, I mean, I know that that Khenpo Gangshar went through a real huge change towards the end, or just before the Chinese communist invasion, and developed crazy wisdom. And things got very wild with Trungpa Rinpoche, who was his student. And he told some very interesting stories about Khenpo Gangshar. But no, I don't know that one. Okay, Khenpo Gangshar was Trungpa Rinpoche's tutor, one of his tutors in Tibet. His root teacher was Jamgon Kongtrul of Shechen, but Khenpo Gangshar was one of his teachers and probably his most important one for whom he had the most affection, perhaps because just before Trungpa Rinpoche left Tibet, Khenpo Gangshar developed crazy wisdom, and the teachings from him became very intense. So we should end here. Let's dedicate the merit, unless anybody has anything else they want to say. Okay. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.